We've reached our final stop on the 2025 Media Day here at the beautiful Kingdom. I'm joined by Andrew. Andrew, what's your role here at TaylorMade? What are we going to talk about?
Director of Product Creation for Woods and Putters, so anything with a head cover on it.
Love that. Love it. So let's touch on the big head cover first, what we're going to be looking at, the brand new Qi35. First and foremost, 35, where do we see that come from?
Yeah, so QI, the quest for inertia, we want to give everybody out there, every golfer across the globe, the most inertia possible, most forgiveness possible.
Yeah.
35 is really like, we're telling a deeper story this year than ever before. You know, usually in the past, we've always talked about like one thing, like 10K, for example.
Yeah.
We really want to get into the deep technology and the multiple engineering principles that we're getting into. And so the 3 actually stands for the 3 silos, the 3 areas where we want to be best in class. So we want to be best in class in design, so form. Best in class in function, engineering, and then lastly, something that maybe we haven't always been the best at, but we're going to strive to, is the best in fit, right? So form, function, and fit, those 3. And then the 5 actually comes from the 5 different heads that we have. So we've got the LS, the low spin head. We've got the Qi35, which is like fit a large breadth of people. We've got the Max and the Max Light. So we've got those 4 heads, and then we've got a select fit part, which is our fitting head, which is the first launch monitor enabled driver head. It's got fit markers built into the carbon fiber. It's only something we can do with our technologies and our patents with carbon face, and then a PU layers is in between those 2 layers. And so it gives us the ability to see so much information pre-impact, which I know you just went through a fitting, so you can just talk specifically about what you felt. But understanding what's happening pre-impact as well as what's happening post-impact, we take all that data and all that information, we can give the fitter more information to be more efficient with the fit, spend more time with the golfer, really sort of do better fittings and so forth. And so we just make that experience so much better.
When coming from a fitting background and all the fitting we do at Miles, when I heard that we were going to get that in the fitting head, one, it just, I hate putting the dots on the head. I mean, it's getting them off the little sheet. And again, as I was just talking to Dwayne, the specific placement of the dots. I mean, sure, you can think you're going to be in the exact spot you need to, but if you're off by a centimeter here, an inch here, it's going to mess with the numbers you're seeing, which ultimately will mess with the fit. So having that built in, and then also I heard with the TrackMan having the measurements, no matter which launch monitor you're on, we know that the data is going to be as close as possible, which, again, when you're trying to fit a driver or something, you need every little thing that we can make better is just going to make it easier to fit for it.
Just to put it into perspective, we made the Qi35 Max driver, and this is how much we obsess details and obsess like half grams of weights. We changed the balance point, like the center of gravity where it intersects with the face, by 0.5 millimeter, which sounds like a very small amount.
Yeah.
That changed the spin rates across the whole face by about lowering those spin rates by about 200 RPMs across the whole face by 0.5 millimeter. Now just imagine how hard it is to put those dots in the face. Do you think you're going to be within 0.5 millimeter?
No.
There's no chance.
No.
Right? They're supposed to be equal distant from the center. So do you really know where you're impacting the ball? Because if the dots are in the wrong place, you don't really know. Are you dynamically lofting? Are you closure rates are changing?
Yeah.
And so by like having such finite locations on everything, it gives us the ability to get true data. If you look at this Kingdom, there's 4 launch monitors out here, 4 TrackMan systems all the way out the range. We've got GC quads, every time you hit the product. And so you take all that, we're tracking the ball to less than 2 inches of its landing location, right? So we're trying to get as accurate as we can. And only the reasons why we obviously we obsess all this information, but it really is we're driving that to the fitter, which is then driving it to the consumer.
Yeah.
So I recommend everybody else get their fit because we can really learn so much about your individual game by doing that.
So let's talk about the differences that we see in Qi35 from our last 2. Actually, we're 3. Well, this will be the 4th iteration of a carbon face.
Correct.
How has that changed over the years?
Yeah, so I think the first couple years there was like a drop a little bit in performance. It's really because we knew this is where we had to go to reach these 10K goals of ours and these low balance point goals that we are now seeing. We had to change the way we create product in the factory. So it's like engineering principles, manufacturing principles, design changes. You look at all this stuff. It took us a few years to get to where we are today.
Yeah.
We've been working within carbon fiber for 20 years, and probably the last 11 years, the team has been working really hard to figure out how to lay out these faces and everything. Yeah. But then just to take it to the factory level and be able to manufacture these in these factories, we've completely changed what a factory looks like today. It's like a high-tech computer factory, not like an old cast and blast house, which is really cool. So, you got to put on special Tyvek suits and You've got to, go through anti-dust chambers, and then we've got like robotic, arms like polishing things and ultrasounding every layer of the face to make sure every bond of every layer of carbon fiber is absolutely perfect. And then, you just look at the differences between product. In the old days when you made things out of metal, you cast it, like the wall thicknesses are different, the weights are different, and we call it like a delta, right, between the what is standard and then the changes that are acceptable. The changes that are acceptable for us are so minute because everything is so accurately made. That just means the product you buy will be very similar to the one next to it on the shelf, right? It doesn't matter which one you pick off the shelf, they're all basically the same. And so it's really important that we have the highest level of engineering in the product, and that we deliver that all the way down to the consumer.
And then just changes again. As I was looking, I set it down. I didn't talk much with Dwayne about it, but the crown looked a lot different than I've seen in iterations. It almost looked like it had more of a 360 fold over into the sole, as opposed to where in QI, in Stealth 2, and Stealth, where you had kind of the crown plate, and you saw where it met with was that a forged ring around it at one point?
Yeah. So when we first started with Stealth, we were worried about impact on that. Some people actually impact on that, between the crown and the face. And last thing we wanted to do was have something chipped there, right?
Yeah.
And so, like metal's durable, the paints have been durable. We've been, formulating paints now for 30 years for this industry to make sure they're elastic but strong. And so we finally wanted to go to the infinity crown, where the crown goes all the way to the leading edge. And we found, because we're using epoxy resins and the way we're doing it, it's actually stronger than the paint. It chips less than the paint does. And so we were able to, through a lot of testing and a lot of engineering studying, we were able to figure out that an infinity crown is actually going to be stronger than a metal paint connection. So yeah, it took a while, but then once you do that, you take away all this excess weight of the metal in that area, and then you can put it somewhere else, and you can make a better performing product. So each year, it's like a building block of making better. And so you can see where we are today. We have more discretionary weight in these products than we've ever had in the past, and all that means is we've got more internal weight to put in different locations to make better performing product.
It leads me right to the next question I was going to ask. Probably the biggest change, obviously, since seeing a carbon face, but we no more sliding weight in the lower spinning head. I'm assuming. Well, Dwayne mentioned it. It's weight saving. What was the aha moment? Like, hey, let's move into more of an interchangeable weight system as opposed to a slide weight.
Yeah. So if you look at the sliding weight itself, you can only move the weight so far because you have to house it in something. Yeah. And then what you're housing, and you have to bond in something, and then you have to structurally reinforce that area so that the soul of a driver is kind of like a speaker, where if it moves, it creates sound. And so the last thing you want is like this bad low tone sound coming out of it. So you put all this extra structure in there, and it's about 17 grams inside of housing a slider weight, where when we use these pinpoint weights, we're using like 7 grams of weight. So you open up and have 10 extra grams to actually do something with it, as well as these pinpoint weights, so we can move further than we can with a sliding weight. So you get more weight to work with, and you can move the weight further, which you equates to when you go through a fitting. If I move those weights from front to back, you visually see it. The numbers jump on the screen of your launch monitor. You see these differences, and so you trust this. Every fitter, as you get fit, you'll trust them more so because you're actually seeing the changes visually as well as what you see on the computer screen.
And then when we're talking about interchangeable weights on a driver, you'll see in other competitors where they'll keep the same sort of system into more of a core model and even into the more forgiving model, where you guys, it's very interchangeable in the LS, and then as you get more forgiving, there's less options. Is there any major reasoning behind that?
Yeah, so for 10K, we wanted to guarantee that every driver we make is over 10K.
Yeah.
The only way to really guarantee that is not allow you to move the weight.
Makes sense.
It's just the way it is. And then with the LS product, we look at our tour players, we look at really good golfers. They want finite adjustments, so we want to give them more adjustments. And so really it is like the type of consumer that's buying the product, does the weighting scenario fit that consumer? And so that's most important, right? As we say, the consumer decides. So I want to make sure if the consumer wants this, I'm going to bring it to them. When it comes to 10K, though, we want to guarantee that everything's 10K, and therefore we're sort of hamstrung to make sure that it is always 10K. So we're going to put all that weight where we know we can guarantee it.
When did, for you guys in R&D, when did 10K start becoming this is something that we need to accomplish? I mean, obviously you've always wanted the most forgiving, but I feel like it was within the last, I'd say probably like 2-ish years where it's like, hey, this is what we kind of need to have in our lineup.
Well, if you looked over the last 10 years, you've seen a slight progressive change in more and more and more MOI every year. I mean, there's a USGA limit on the what we call IAXX, or from top down, right, 5,900. So you can't go any higher than that one. So you have we're looking at IZZ, and we're making sure that that one is, high as well. And so when you put these all together, what you think the maximum limit that the USGA will allow is about 10K. And so that was our goal, is to get to that limit.
Yeah.
Just because the more forgiveness we give you, the more forgiving the product, right? So the more you miss hit the center of the face, you're just going to see straighter drives, and it's going to give you more confidence to swing a little harder and hit a little further. And so, it really comes down to what we're allowed to do, and like what do we think we can do without losing other performance parameters, right? So you don't want to again take something away to add something else. And so we've been slowly adding to these things, and it just takes years and years of innovation to figure out how to get there.
What's the LS at right now in terms of MOI units?
7.7 with a weight in the back, and like 6.8 with a weight in the front.
It's still very forgiving for a model like that.
Yeah, it's a forgiving product. But again, you're going to have a much lower CG. You're going to have a much more high area of the face where you get high launch, low spin drives. Like, we're unlocking a lot of the face on that product. And then, it's really about low spin, right? So if you're somebody who has a descending blow angle and you're creating a lot of backspin, that product's going to be better for you than the Max might, would be. And then if you're somebody who hits with a lot of club head speed, a lot of ball speed, you're going to see a lot of lift. That's going to stop it from creeping too high and ballooning on you. So, we look at it for different scenarios, but again, we've got low spin, we've got core that does like a lot of everything, and then we've got Max that's really about forgiving.
So obviously drivers, that's the flashy piece of equipment. That's what everybody wants to replace every single year. What's the new driver? How far can I hit this driver? But fairway woods are, I would say, not more important in the grand scheme, but you need to have a fairway wood that you can trust. Mm-hmm. What's been awesome about your guys' fairway woods over the years, something that I've always noticed, I'm a gear geek to every extent. I'm always looking at what's in players' bags. You see your guys' fairway woods creep into other people's bags, where guys that you're not particularly paying to play that fairway wood. What gives you guys that edge where you see those start to creep in?
Yeah, so we have worked really hard to have the most performance in our fairway woods in terms of long ball flights, boring trajectories, peak heights in certain versions of them. When you look at the tour, we are dominating on tour.
Yeah.
You look at the fairway wood count week in, week out. We have won 7 of the 8 signature events. So the only one we didn't win was the first one. And traditionally, players are in their product, and then they gravitate back to the TaylorMade, the non-contracted athletes. We won every major, and we won the Olympics, right? And everybody on the podium on the Olympics on the men's side, right? All of them had QI fairway woods in the bag. So it's a true testament to how well they perform. The one area where we were lacking a little bit was not having loft sleeves into our fairway wood system. And we did that because we're trying to put all the performance into the head, right? And so we don't want to take away something to add something else. And so it just took our engineers a little bit longer to figure out how do we put, the FCT loft sleeves into our fairway woods without losing any performance. And our numbers speak to themselves. We've aligned our swing weight systems in line with impact of ball. We've changed our speed pockets on the bottom to make sure the faces stay hot. We changed the wall thicknesses and the low toe area of our faces as well. So we've done a lot of work internally to make sure that when we put the loft sleeve in there, we don't lose performance. And we're pleasantly surprised at where we ended up. And again, we've got 4 different fairway woods between the Tour, which has the most weight maneuverability, so the most fitting capabilities. We have that in the 3, 5, and 7, all with loft sleeves. In the core line, we have 3 3HL, and 5 wood with loft sleeves. We do have a 7 wood, but that is bonded. Again, we got to be somewhat careful with skews. And then finally, with the Max line, we've got a 3 and 5 with loft sleeves, and a 7 and a 9 wood in that product too. Those are bonded. So it's a great array of product. They perform really well. We've got tour players in both the tour line and the core line, and so we want to make sure both of those perform right. They look right at a dress. We've made sure that we keep that profile to dress, but we've lowered the skirts a little bit so they sit on the ground a little bit better. They just look like they perform, and
they do.
And our tour players absolutely love them.
Talk to me a little bit about the emergence of higher lofted fairway woods on tour, because it's not like they haven't always existed. You always hear the story about Freddie Couples with his 9 wood back in the day, but more and more now you're seeing, especially that 7 wood, and you've seen some videos of players testing 9 woods from time to time. What do you think was that moment where players were more inclined to give that a shot?
I think it's a combination of a lot of things. I think one thing is these younger athletes are more open to, not just bombing the ball as far as possible, but having a different sort of set makeup in the bag. We're seeing the desire to have larger face drivers with square, more square to impact look to them, and less toe flare. We're seeing them wanting different long irons in the bag, but most importantly, they're seeing out of the rough, a fairway wood is going to outperform a hybrid. There's less hostle to grab the grass. There's a longer sole plate on that thing to sort of get through the rough. And they're seeing that they're hitting certain distances with launch conditions. They're really trying to stop it on the green, and they're able to do that now with these lofted fairway woods, which they couldn't do with their long irons in the past. And so you're seeing that trend from tour happen to retail. And so we're doing the same thing. We're starting to add more 7 woods, more 9 woods into the line based on that. And we're eliminating some of our rescue hybrid products too. So, we had 3 lines of rescues last year. This year we only have 2. And it's because we want a pro line or a classic line and our max line. And so our standard core models will have loft sleeves in them. So you have that fit adjustability in those. And then we'll have a max line that's all bonded. Really about replacing irons and finding the proper distance gappings for those players. So again, that trend's happening on tour, and we're seeing it happen in retail as well.
Yeah, it always falls through. I'm in every fitting when I would have someone come in talking about utility irons, hybrids, and asking them what's the purpose of this club, and a lot of it is attacking longer par 4s, shorter par 5s. And I was like, hey man, I mean, we do need that stopping power to make sure that, yeah, sure, we're hitting the distance, but we don't want to go over the green. And every time I would give someone a 7 wood or any of those higher loft fairway woods, at first there's a little bit of hesitation looking at the amount of loft in this shape, but as soon as they saw the window it takes off in and how straight it goes with the extra MOI being bigger head, I know myself when I put it down, it was 2 swings, it was like, no, this is going straight in the bag. It's because it makes that 3-iron shot, that like 220, 225 distance for me so much easier. It's a no-brainer now of like going for it on a par 5. I have 230. It's like, yeah, no, I'm going for it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think everybody in the old days wanted a 2-iron in the bag, and now nobody wants a 2-iron in the bag, right? So it's much easier to transition to having a few more lofted fairways. I've done the same thing. I've put a 7-wood in the bag last year, and I couldn't be happier with the results I get on those long par 4s.
One last question. We see in the tour head, the Qi35 tour fairway wood. Talk to me about the adjustable weight on that and maybe where we've seen changes.
Yeah, so we do have a sliding type weight in this product. I think this is it. Yep, this is it. We did make it differently. Again, we don't want to just do sliding weights because we know it uses a lot of discretionary weight. We made this one smaller and slightly lighter, so it's a 40-gram weight versus a 50-gram weight. So you're like, oh, did you take away performance? Not at all. We actually make this thing where it's blunt on one side and it's tapered on the other, so it's heavy one side and light on the other. Yeah. So you can move it back and forth as far back as possible. You can actually unscrew this, take it out, spin it 180 degrees and put it in and put that blunt side forward, and now you can have more forward CG. So like, again, think weight back, tighter dispersion, weight forward, more ball speed. And so you're able to do more with less weight, which means we're using less weight to house it, which again puts more performance back into the face. So it's pretty impressive what we've been able to do with this product. Yeah.
What do you think the split is on tour of guys that are going to be in something like that versus more of a core model?
So before we launched this one, we had most players in our core line. Yeah. And I think it was just because they liked the performance out of that. I think we're going to see about 50-50 this year with this product. So, yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Really excited to see it. Thank you so much for your time today, man.
Thanks so much.
Pleasure.